Hi, everyone. My name is Mary Anderson. I am the Director of Career Services at the college. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do and how you can connect with us and when you might reach out to us for different questions and support in your journey here at CSS. My time with you for the next about 1 hour will be to talk primarily about resumes and cover letters. I also want to introduce you to our system we use for job and internship postings called Handshake. So just a little bit on that as well. Just out of curiosity, will you chat in where you're zooming in from, like city, state? So where are you coming from? Where's home? Just that's always fun to see. You could just put in the chat. Angora, Maryland, Minnesota. Okay. As you're typing that in, I grew up in central Minnesota and then I was in the cities. Now I'm in Duluth, lived in Iowa for a little bit in there. Was born in Illinois, lived in Wisconsin as a child. So I'm a Midwest person. I've rotated Midwest. So I haven't been on lived outside of those areas. Awesome. It's for Duluth today. It is very hot and humid for this time of year. So everybody's like, what's happening? And it feels like summer in Duluth. And I was walking with one of our students who works in the office, who's an international student. And I was like in a sleeveless shirt and I was kind of sweating. And she was in a sweater. And I was like, I am so warm today. And she's like, it's all about context and what you're used to. And I said, it sure is. So we had a chuckle about that. Great. Thank you for sharing. That's helpful to know. Nice to meet you at least virtually today. I'm going to share my screen. I told Katie this already. I'll be sharing the presentation. So feel free to take notes, but don't feel like you have to be furiously writing everything down because you'll get the slides afterwards. And it is being recorded if you want to listen to it over and over again because it's so intriguing, right? So let's get this shared and see if you can see it okay. I have to move everything around so I can still see you too. All right. Are you looking at the slide deck now? Yeah, okay. So let's do slideshow. When we're done in conversation tonight, we'll be having an assignment where you're taking the information we're talking about resumes. You'll be either writing or modifying or updating your resume and then submitting it to our office for review. We'll give you feedback on that. You make updates and then they send it back to you, Katie, after the updates for an assignment. Right. Okay. If you have individual questions for me, sometimes you'll feel comfortable asking with a group right now tonight, but there's things like, I'd actually like to ask you this privately. You can reach out to me anytime with my email. So it's just manders1@css.edu, and that'll be in the slide deck here. In our office broadly, so you know, we work with students at the beginning when they're trying to figure out what's my major, my career, my sort of vocational plan. Then we're helping students with what we're talking about tonight. I'd say document preparation, resumes and cover letters, starting to think about interviewing skills in the future and applications, and then certainly helping the transition out. So as you're applying for jobs in the future, maybe internships, those would be all reasons that you might reach out to our office. You do qualify once you graduate. You still can reach out to our office. So some of the things, I always say it's like a menu at a restaurant. You're not going to need all of these things at once. I mean, maybe sometimes you have an appetite for everything, but generally it's like, oh, today I really need the resumes, and then I'm going to move on to cover letters. I'm not going to worry about interviewing to next year, whatever it might be. Some of these things, it might be that you reach out after graduation or you've had a change. Maybe you're applying for a promotion at work and you're like, I'd like some help updating or thinking about how to prepare for that interview. Unlimited resources for your first 3 years, and then we have a 3 appointment maximum after that, which is usually plenty. It's usually not an issue. Okay. So I'm going to share resources tonight. I also want you to know there's a whole bunch of resources out there for you. One of the things that we have is when you look at all your Brightspace courses at Scholastica, when you pull them up, there's a tab and it will either say like all or community. If you do that, you'll see a whole nother course called Career Services. And we have all these modules that are out there. Let's see if I If I changed now, are you seeing that screen? Did I do that okay? Okay. So if you're on Brightspace, yours is going to look a little different, but if you're on Brightspace, it will look like this and it'll say Career Services. And we just did a bunch of updating on this particular site so that sometimes when you want to reach out for services, we might not be open. I want to make sure you still have everything at your fingertips. So right on the main page here, it reminds you about how to reach out to us, where to send documents, resumes at css.edu. We just purchased a brand new technology called Big Interview, which allows you to practice interviewing from the comfort of your own home. Katie, this replaces interview.stream. Yeah, it's gone through a couple revisions. This is even better. I can set you up as a faculty member on that too, Katie. One of the things we liked about this, it's got a more modern feel. The questions are really helpful. There's tutorials. There's also a little bit of an AI component to it, which I need to practice myself, and I've been putting it off, but it allows you practice an interview question, and then AI will tell you things like, how many times did you say and ah? Were you talking too fast, too slow, too loud, too soft? The things that AI can actually give you feedback on. It's also just a chance for you to gain confidence hearing yourself talk about yourself. And that's one of the most challenging things in interviews. So we do mock interviews with students. So if you want to do that in the future, I'd set up a Zoom time that fits with your schedule. I'd ask you questions. We go back and forth. But this is a way that you can do it on your own time. So that link is here. There's some other great resources right down here. I'm not going to go through all of those. But up under the content, on the left, you'll see there's a whole section just on cover letters or just on interviewing. And there's one just on resumes. So I'm going to highlight that today. So it reminds you the purpose of resumes. It gives you some direct links to our handouts, a few things to think about when you're getting started. And we're building a bank of resume examples out here. So it just makes it really easy for you to find all that information. So in addition to what we're sharing tonight, this will be another great resource for you. You can reach out to me directly. Careers at CSS comes to our general inbox. Resumes, if you're submitting a resume or a cover letter, or in the future, if you're applying to a graduate program and you have to do a graduate essay for some of those programs, you could submit it there. Okay, let me pause there. Any questions about those tools and resources? Okay, I'll try to check on chat, but if you see something, Katie, you can let me know too. Okay. Okay, one of the resources, if you haven't found it yet, is called Handshake. So many colleges across the US use this platform. So anytime an employer reaches out and says, we have a job or we have an internship we want to share with your students, we would direct them to Handshake. The beauty of this, because so many colleges use it, the employer only has to do the profile on the job once, and then they just select colleges the positions get fed to. How many of you have been on LinkedIn at any time? Any of you have profiles on that yet? A couple people? Okay. Handshake is kind of like that, but it's designed for current college students and young grads from colleges. So great place to look for jobs and internships. It would take you, if you have a resume done, I would make that your first priority. Then if you come back to work on your profile, the minimum will take you 15 or 20 minutes to get a profile up and running. And then if you want to do some more advanced things, I'd say another 30 or 45 minutes after that. So it's not a huge time commitment if you have your resume done, because it's all the same content you're putting over there. You would access this at css.joinhandshake.com. So if you just search Handshake, you won't get into the right platform. Use the css.joinhandshake.com, and then it's single sign-on, so you'd use your CSS sign-in credentials to get into it. Once you're in it, there's a place you automatically will be at community, meaning employers can find you, which is great. You probably do want employers to find you, but if you're getting annoyed by reach outs by employers, you can come in and always change it under settings to private. So sometimes you're like, I'm not actually looking right now. I'm getting a lot of sales emails and it's bothering me. Change it back to private again. The things you'd want to put in your Handshake profile is your work experience. Shoot for having a couple of those in there. A little bit about other things you've been involved in, volunteering, community, extracurricular. Any particular extra skills you have, you would include in there. It is also a place that you would include a headshot, and you don't need to go out and pay someone to get a headshot done if you don't have this, but find some place with a nice kind of solid background, at least from your shoulders up. You have something that you're wearing that you feel good about that isn't distracting. Take a picture with your phone, and that's fine. It does not need to be professionally done. This is interesting because both LinkedIn and Handshake, it is sort of the expectation to have a picture, but on a resume, you don't want your picture. So interesting, these rules, sometimes unspoken rules that you're supposed to know. So resume, don't put your picture on it, but these profiles would like a picture. Okay. Once you've done that, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but when you're in the system, you go under your name on upper right profile and you build it out. I think it will be pretty intuitive for all of you. If you've done that and you're like, have I done enough? Send me an email and say, would you do a handshake check for me? And I would just do a glance through and say, oh, I want more here. You're exactly right on track, or consider changing this. The more information you put in, sort of the better it is, because it will start to feed you things that are a good fit. So if you put types of positions, if you're listing your skills, locations you want to work in the future, the more the better. And then it will start just like, Netflix, start thinking for you. You share a job you like, and it's like, oh, you like this job. Here's 10 more jobs we think you might like. So I do think for most of you, you'll find it pretty intuitive, but don't reach out if you have any questions. LinkedIn, I'm not going to go through it this evening, but we'd also encourage you to be on LinkedIn. There's overlap, but they each have different things. Handshake was designed to be a job and internship posting site for college students, so it does really well at that. But you can also do a little bit of networking, a little bit of researching employers. LinkedIn was really originally designed to be a networking tool for professionals. So it's a professional version of a social media site. And so it is great to find other people in your field, to learn about organizations, to showcase some of your strengths and achievements. So there is overlap, but they each have a different function. So I would encourage you as you go forward to think about developing both of those. Okay, that being said, you're all super busy people, I'm sure. First step is resume, because once you have that, you get feedback, you feel confident, you can use that to build these other profiles, and it goes quicker because you have all the content in one spot. So keep those in mind. Questions about either of those? I know that's surface level, but anything you've been wondering? Okay.
I actually have a question.
Yeah.
I put it in the chat, but I don't think
Oh,
anybody said.
okay.
Um, so my question is Handshake just strictly for those who live in Minnesota? Because I live out of state. I'm not sure how useful this would actually be for me. So is
No,
it just for job postings and internships in the Minnesota area?
that is a fantastic question. It isn't. And you can put in geographic locations. So you put in, what kind of position, and then you put in your zip code or city state. And so colleges across the country are using it. Or you have the function to put in remote or hybrid, depending what you're looking for.
Okay.
So I would add it. And I always tell students it's only one tool. I don't think it's perfect by any means, but it should be one
Mhm.
of several tools you're using in that process.
All
Yeah, thanks
right.
for asking that question.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, good. If you think of other things as we go through, always just jump in. Okay, resumes. How many of you, I'm going to see, rather than have you chat this one, and I'm going to have you just hold up fingers because I'm going to ask you a question. If you think about where your resume is today, right now, how many of you would say 5? I've been working on it, feeling pretty good about it. How many of you would say 1? I'm starting from scratch or redoing it, and or somewhere in between? So what's the range from like 1, I'm just starting, to 5, I'm feeling pretty good? Where are you at? Okay, Deidre's 4, 5, 4, 2, 4. Okay. That's helpful. It's usually a range in a class. I have people who've been putting a fair amount of energy into it because they recently applied for a position. So some of what I share, you're going to be like, got it. I know that. I'm hopeful that I'll still share some things that are maybe unique as you're transitioning to having new credentials and new education. Some of you might have had something that was great a few years ago, and now you're like, I think I'd rather just start over because it's just not appropriate anymore. It's old information. Okay, hopeful that regardless of where you're at in there, that you'll get some good information tonight. When we talk about documents, resumes and CVs, you might have heard both of those terms. Resume is what we're going to focus on for jobs. Curriculum vitae or CVs are longer documents primarily used in academia. So if you're ever applying for a faculty position, but also sometimes if you apply abroad. So if you're applying in Europe, they tend to use longer versions of the resumes that are closer to a CV. A resume, 1 to 2 pages, is summarizing your experiences and your background. So you're not putting everything you've ever done. You might have a master copy of your resume. In fact, that's a great idea that does include everything. And then you're taking that and pulling it back to 1 to 2 pages of the things most related and relevant for whatever you're applying for at the time. So we're going to go through that. We're going to keep that in mind. The reason you don't generally go over 2 pages is employers are telling us we won't read it. We're really looking for that succinct, what have you done? What's your education? What are your skill sets? The cover letter is your narration that goes along with it. I think about the resume as sort of the facts about you. The cover letter is tying those facts with the position description. Why are you a good fit for this particular position, and why you're interested in our organization? So we'll go through a little bit of that. In addition, personal statements. If you apply to graduate programs in the future, again, you often have to do an essay. So keep that in mind. If that comes up in the future, we can work on it. And then sometimes you will have a portfolio, a place where you're showcasing some of your sort of accomplishments, your projects. You might want to show things that you've done. So you might hear all of those in an application process. And then in addition to all of these is just the standard application, which sometimes seems very annoying once you've been working on these things. So you're like, I got the resume, it's beautiful, and then you get an application and you still have to put it in. You have to cut and paste. They want you to fill the application out fully and completely, even if it's all in your resume. And it seems duplicative, but it's just sort of the standard process there. Okay. In all of those, regardless of the document, it's important to take time to write it, reflect on it, to revise it. I would have several sets of eyes. So our office, faculty member, your friend who loves editing, have them take a look at it because you know what you're trying to say and you might stop, not be able to see the typos and errors. So give yourself plenty of time to review those things. Okay, let's jump into the sort of the most common questions people have about resumes. How long? We talked about that. If you do go to 2 pages, you want to justify why you're going to a second page. Meaning if you only have like 2 sentences, 3 sentences on a second page, we're going to go back and do some reformatting so you can fit it on 1 page. I'd say typically you want at least a third of a page on the second page to justify it going to 2 pages. If you do that, you might want to put a footer or a header with your name again on the second page. More often, people are only looking at applications online, but there's some places that still print out, and you want to make sure those 2 pages stay together. Readability is really important. We hear from employers that at first glance, it's like 20, 30 seconds. So they do this look through at the content. So if we know that to be true, you want to make sure that you're at least 10 font size or larger. Maybe you can read 8 and 9, but a lot of people can't. So you want to keep that about 10, 10, 11 is the most common. We used to have students always use 12 font size when I first started in this field, and now that looks too big. It's funny how things change just over time. So I would consider like your headers on a resume at maybe 11, the content underneath at 10. Your name, that can be bigger. That can be 18, 20, 22 font size. I would encourage you to use bullets instead of a paragraph format. Um, and that's primarily because if you're scanning through something, it's a lot easier to scan through bullets than it is to read a paragraph. I would encourage you to use some of this stylization, so a little bit of bold or italics, mostly to guide the reader's eye through it. So maybe you always bold the name of the organization and you italicize your job title. It's just helpful to break that text up. Margins, we say 1 inch, but the reality is the top one for sure can be smaller because the top one ends up being like your name letterhead. It's your name and your contact information. It can rise, I would say, 1/2 inch from the top. So, like standard papers, you always hear 1 inch, 1 inch. Resume, you can get away with a 1/2 inch on the top, probably a half on the bottom. The smallest I go left, right is about zero 0.8 or zero 0.9. If not, it looks like it's crammed in there. You'll know when it starts to look too crowded on that document. Okay.
Mary,
Yes.
what is your take on the use of templates?
Hmm. It's a great question. People like templates because it's a quick way to get a resume done. And so if you're in a bind and you're like, oh, this position came up and I have 3 days, you plug the information and it's great. Long term, I'd suggest not using a template. And it's primarily because you don't have full control over the editing. And they all start to look alike. Like I can usually tell when someone's used a template because it looks like a whole bunch of others that have come in. So I would encourage you to use either Word or Google Doc so that you have full control. You might look at some templates to get ideas of what you want yours to look like, but then do all the formatting yourself. The other thing is when you're getting ready to submit it, whichever format, Word or a Google Doc, save it as a PDF because that's most readable by most people. And when you save it, make sure it's generally like I would have Mary Anderson resume. Maybe on your own in your Google Doc, it's like stupid resume draft 25, but you don't want to save it as that. So save it as a PDF, first name, last name, and resume. Okay. Sometimes people also ask about color, if you should use any color on the resume. I think you can. I don't think there's a problem with using color, but limit it and make sure it's not like yellows and oranges tend to be hard for people to read or print if anybody's printing. So keep them solid and dark. Usually the place that people would use it is maybe their name and maybe the name of their headers. But don't feel like you have to use color. Just if you're like, I would love to use a deep blue for my name and then education, experience, technical skills, you could do that in deep blue as well. So yes, you can use it. You don't need to. Okay. These are the sections. We're going to go through each one of these so you have a sense of what you might include in there. Things you wouldn't include, though, in the US, at least, if you ever travel abroad, we'll look at country specific to see what the rules are. In the US, no height or weight or age or picture. Generally, you're moving away from including a section on hobbies and interests. That used to be really common and now it isn't. I think because you're trying to be so concise with the information on the resume, you pull that off. It used to be like hobbies, horseback riding, reading books, kayaking. And I think you can cut that. You can have that in conversation and interview if you wanted to, but not on the resume. I'd be a little cautious about religious and political information. Can the reader legally bias against that? No, they shouldn't be. But could it in some way influence them? Maybe. So I just try to be really cautious about including that. No abbreviations except for states. So the state of Maine or the state of Minnesota or something that's widely known in your field. That would be okay. You're getting rid of I statements. So if you currently have a bullet that says, I was responsible for, you're going to cut all of that verbiage out and just start right with that action verb. So maybe you have, I was responsible for supervising a staff of 5. Start instead saying, supervised a staff of 5. So get rid of that. And then, of course, everything you put out there has to be provable, either because it's on your transcript or we can contact your supervisor. It seems silly, but people do get caught in lies on resumes, and you don't want to do that. So make sure everything you are telling your best self, right? You're putting for the best parts of what you did in that job, but it still has to be honest information. Okay. Any other questions coming in? Haven't heard. No, we're good.
I
Okay,
have a question,
yeah.
Mary. Um, so for like when you put things that you learn in school, like maybe we had a class and we learned about CPT or ICD-10 codes. If we haven't like applied it in like real world scenario, how do we put that on the resume saying, yeah, we learned about it, we applied it in school context, but that doesn't mean I'm necessarily an expert at it.
Yes, that's a great question. There's kind of two ways. Sometimes if it's just part of the name of a course, you can have a section like relevant courses, database modeling, programming in Java, whatever it is, which shows that was just in a course. So you would have your education information and would be like relevant courses. So then they know for sure it was just part of a class. But some of the things you're describing wouldn't be the title of the class, it's topics you covered within a class. I would encourage all of you to have a technical skills section. And there's a couple different ways you can organize that. Oftentimes people will say technical skills and they'll name like proficient, colon, da, 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 background in, blah, 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 exposure to, or introduction to, because then you feel good to say introduction to, I don't know what the one you shared was, some kind of coding maybe. So you can actually name the level and then list those skills after it.
So
Does
that
that
would
make
be in a
sense?
skills section, and then would you
Mhm.
have to also have, if you're gonna put that in a skills section, do you also have to have a relevant courses section to back that one up?
You don't have to. Some people will choose to do that, but you don't have to. I think the reason relevant courses can be helpful is it's more of a broad title of things you've covered. The other gets into those specifics. I think that it depends what you're applying for. If you're applying to a place where it's maybe not within a health information management department, you might need to do more explaining of the courses you've done, right? If you're sort of in those allied fields, then it's helpful to name some courses because they might not know a lot about this particular program. But if you're applying to someone who, for example, graduated from CSS, you probably don't need to list the relevant courses, focus more on the skills.
I was going to say I do have a sample that I can share with you
Yeah.
guys.
Yep.
One student created kind of a cool little table where kind of one column was relevant courses and then the other column kind of highlighted the topics. For example, with database modeling or say data analytics, the use of like they put data analytics as the course and then over in the next column they put the systems that were used, R or whatever those were. So just I'll share that after class. I'll put it in an announcement.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it too. And this is interesting. Like when we talk about resumes, there's often not just one right way to do it, and it depends a little bit on your background. So it's good to look at samples to see which ones fit the best for you. Back to the skills section, one of the things that I often will take off if someone has in a skills section are the non-technical skills. So in a skills section, I would focus on the things you just described. And rather than having skills, communication, team player, strong work ethic, I want you to prove those in your bulleted descriptions rather than just listing them in a skills section. And that's because it's the feedback we're getting from employers. Employers will say, well, anybody can say they can communicate. Prove it instead by describing what you did in a particular job. So I do want you all to have a skills section, but really those kind of concrete technical skills.
How do we add those if we're not supposed to do paragraph style?
Yep, so you would start with that as your verb. So you could say, demonstrated ability to work effectively or collaboratively with a team of 4 in a cross-disciplinary setting, or communicated daily with customers via email, phone, and in person. So you're actually thinking about the skills that they'd be looking for and the skills that you've had, and you start your bulleted description with those.
So you're including those soft skills into those hard skills.
That's right,
Okay.
in your bulleted descriptions. Yep.
Okay,
Mhm.
thanks.
Yeah, and it's interesting when we think about our professional organization surveys employers and says, beyond like the technical skills of a field, what are you looking for in applicants? In like, regardless of the field, it tends to be the same top 5 or 6. It's communication skills in all format. It is the ability to work independently. It's the ability to work as part of a team. It's critical thinking skills, problem solving kind of skills, some technology. You're in a field that has that, but if not, they want to see some technology. So those are the things that you want to showcase, in any part-time job or setting that you've had. Mhm. Any other questions? Okay, just keep jumping in because I'd rather address it when you're thinking about it. Okay. Name and contact information. Some of this we talked about already. Name big and bold up at the top. They want to know who you are, if there's any connection to you. If you're posting your resume out there in like a real broad site, you're posting it to Indeed or something like that, I would remove your mailing address to protect your privacy. Only include your email and phone number. That's different than you're applying to Mayo Clinic directly. It's going to a place, then it's okay to put a mailing address in there. But if not, protect that a bit. If you start using LinkedIn and you're active and your profile is well built, you could include your LinkedIn URL as part of your name and contact information. Yeah, when you're getting active again and applying for jobs, make sure you have an outgoing message on your cell phone. Employers will say they want to know it's you when they call to offer you an interview. So make sure that's up and active and has room in it. Someone just told me mine is full right now. I need to go delete some things, I guess. So, but when you're looking for a job, make sure that's true. Okay. The education for all of you, I would suggest that comes next. You might see examples where experience is coming before education, but the reason you may be applying for different jobs or are becoming newly qualified for jobs is probably based on your education that you're pursuing right now. So I would make education next. Generally, employers only care about the places where you're pursuing a degree or have completed a degree. Less interested, like you may have done 2 courses at this community college and then you moved and you did another 2 courses here. You don't need to include that. It's really where you're pursuing the degree. Within each of these sections, always most recent to least recent. So you would have CSS education, maybe you have a 2-year degree, that would come underneath of that. In the future, if you do a master's degree, that's the top one, and then your Bachelor of Science, and then education or certifications that you've had prior. Employers it varies about 50-50, whether they care about your GPA. I think if it's something you're proud of, you've been on the dean's list, you've received any academic awards, put it out there. It's one piece of your story, one piece that shows your curiosity and your engagement and your commitment to learning. So then I would put it out there. Sometimes students will also put like a minor, or if you have a concentration, or if you study abroad, certifications, all of that would be underneath a section called education. Sometimes people call it education and certifications or education and training. In the future, if you do some certifications in your field that end up with, some initials, you could put that after your name. So is it be RHIT? No. Okay, just
Sorry, I was like, where's my
making up initials.
unmute? Yeah, all of these students will be eligible for the RHIA after they graduate. But I think at least one I know of currently has their RHIT. So if you are credentialed, definitely put that after your name at the top.
Mhm. So you could write it at the top, right at the top with your name. So your name, comma, and then the initials. Yep, that's great. Okay.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Seeing like we're not fully graduated yet, is there something that we should list on there, like the potential graduation date
Yep.
or like how many credits are left?
Yes, potential graduation date. So you would put like the College of St. Scholastica, Bachelor of Science in Health Informatics Manage, no, yes, yeah. And then
Informatics and information management.
I always flip those two.
It's okay.
And then you put expected May 2025. That's how I would list it. And then once it happens, of course, you take the expected off, May 2025. Yep, that's great. Mhm.
The only thing I would add to is a lot of students will put RHIA eligible
Mm,
once they get past fall semester, because once you're in your last semester of our program, you can actually take the RHIA exam early if you want. So,
I think that's great. And so if you think about your education section, you'd have the college name, your major, then you might have a bullet, and it would be your GPA, and then a bullet that you're eligible, RHIA eligible, bullet dean's list, 3 semesters. So that would, just like it would mimic what your job section looks like. It's like, here's my education, here's a couple things I want you to know about my background in this area. I think that's great. Okay. Any other questions on education?
I have one quick.
Yeah.
So I've had my resume reviewed several times, specifically by my employer as well.
Mhm.
And they had me list my certifications separately underneath education because I do have an RHIT and a CDIP.
Mhm.
And then the date I obtained those. It
Mm.
should I even have that, being that they're behind my name?
Hmm. Sometimes it's helpful to see a listing of those certifications. Like, it really stands out to have them. If you're using all of those behind your name, I don't think it needs to be in both spots. I don't know, Katie, you can jump in.
yeah, I don't think it's necessary to have it in both spots. I was just thinking when it might be.
See, now mine is
Good.
on 2 pages, and then my certifications are on the second page. So it's not within my header
Oh,
on my first page. So it's on the second page. So they can still see that I still have those certifications. But it says, I don't know if I need both of them if
yeah.
it's already called out in one spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes people are trying to fill out a page. They might not
Yeah.
have as much experience, and I'm like, yeah, put it in there. Other times people are like, I am 3 lines over, and I'd say, cut this out because you're going to have those initials right after your name.
Yeah.
So
That was my first thought is, do you have room?
yeah,
Is there
that's
room?
right. Yeah. Do you have room or are you trying to, fill it out?
Yeah.
The other thing, if people go to 2 pages, just a broad statement, I would have your most important and relevant information on page 1 and sort of your supporting stuff on page 2. So
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, I've also had these 3 other jobs where I learned great customer service and work ethic and communication, but less related to the field. Put that stuff on page 2 so you capture their attention in page 1.
I have
Okay.
a question about work experience. On my current resume, I go way back to 2000. So yeah, I'm
Mhm.
old, but it makes, because I have all of this experience, healthcare experience, it makes it 3 pages. Can I take some of it off,
Mhm.
like the older jobs?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a couple different ways you can do it. The rule of thumb is about 10 years back, but there's always exceptions for that because you might be wanting to show that you've had particular healthcare experiences or a progression of some healthcare. So that's just a rule of thumb. One of the things you might end up doing, I'm going to go to this next one, you might end up dividing your experiences. So you're going to have your education, and then your next header would be relevant experiences. Those are your most recent or your highest level positions, and you're going to have bulleted descriptions for those. You then might have a section called supporting experiences, where you're just laundry listing the next 3 jobs with no bullets. But you want the employer to see, oh, look at, has worked in healthcare since 2000, if you choose to go back that far, and maybe can see the different job titles you've had. But the reality is you don't have to put everything on the resume. You likely will on the application, like the formal application system, but the resume, you get to choose what you include in there. So, have you had your last job for quite a bit of time, Sherry? Or your current job if you're still working?
current job I've had for the last 5 years.
And the
Um,
one before that, what length of time was that one?
January 2019 through 2021 was the job before then. So the 3 jobs I've had since moving here to Maryland, I started in 2015,
Okay.
and there's been 3 jobs.
My gut reaction is, without seeing your whole resume, is that you would have those 3 jobs described with bullets. And then you're going to think about the jobs that came before that. And is there value added to showing that you've had that work experience, even if you don't have bulleted descriptions? Does that help to show the full picture of settings or background that you've had? Does that help?
Yeah, I get
Maybe.
it maybe.
Okay.
Completely different than what I'm doing now. It was laboratory science, so I was
Okay.
working in a lab. It's not what I'm going to school for. So
Mhm. So I would say you could either drop it all together, or you have a section called supporting experiences, and you list a couple of those jobs to show that you do have a strong work history and you understand healthcare in a broad sense, and then focus your energy on the things that are more related.
okay.
Yeah.
Mary, is that where that master list would come in really good? That master resume, like you said, and then Sherry would be able to pull in based on what she was applying for from that?
That's exactly right. Let's say in the future you're applying for a position it's really HIM, but it has some connection to laboratory sciences. Yeah, then you want to know you know that language in that world of work versus you're doing something in security and privacy at a hospital. I mean, it's nice to know you have the background, but less important. That's exactly right. Mm-hmm.
Sounds great. Thanks, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Mary, I have a question.
Yes.
So in my current, well, with my employer, I've been in the same department for almost 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
but was recently promoted. So, would I need to like term out my previous position and add the promotion as a new start date?
Yeah, you
How,
know what?
how
Mm-hmm.
would
Is
that
it?
work? Because the job role is obviously is completely different.
Mm-hmm. Okay, 2 options, and it depends a little bit on how different it is.
Yeah,
You
my
can
resume is crazy, so you're gonna have a lot of fun with it.
Excellent. Love a challenge. That's great.
I've held so much in these roles from medical records and billing and just doing some auditing, like all of this stuff. So my resume is crazy. But
But also great skills for you to be sharing that you've had experience in all those different areas. So if you've had one employer, name the employer, and it's 2 different positions within that department. So you
yes.
might have employer and department. Always start with the highest level positions, whatever you were promoted to, and you might say like January 24 to present.
Okay,
And you'd
that's how
have,
I have it now.
yep, and have some bulleted descriptions. This is one way you could do it. Then
Okay.
underneath, you're going to have the previous job, and it would be like whatever until January 24, and you have a few bullets, but maybe less bullets there. You're going to have usually more bullets at your highest level position.
Okay.
The higher level position, you might even have one of the bullets that says promoted to position based on, showcase that you got promoted.
Okay.
Sometimes they're so similar. People are like, I got promoted, but what really it ends up being is I did everything I did before, and now I'm also doing supervision and budget management. So they
Mhm.
might put department, job, highest level job, next level job, and then they have shared bullets underneath because you're doing both things. So that varies based on the position.
Okay.
So here's an example. My title is director. My
Yes.
title before it was career counselor,
Mhm.
but I still do career counseling in my current position. So I might say both things and showcase that I'm still doing the career counseling, but now I just do all these other things on top of that.
Okay, because yeah, there's some job functions that I still do. but at a
Yep.
higher level with
Mhm.
with more research.
Hmm.
So, yeah, so that's where kind of like where I was stuck. So I
And one
just
of
threw something on there just to like remind myself I gotta do something with this, but I wasn't sure how to do that.
if you list it as two different
I
positions,
did.
okay, and you have the bullets, one of the things, and this would be true for any of you, if you've already covered a certain skill in another job or in another bullet, you don't need to use the space to say it again. So
Okay.
maybe in the other position, you're saying, here's the thing I did. In your current job, it might be that maybe you're still doing that thing, but it's more about I analyze this or I do
Yes, that's
sections or I do
exactly
reporting.
like that's it. Yeah, that's exactly what, because it's a project team and that's kind
Yeah.
of like what it's new. So that's the thing. This team was just created. And so I was promoted into it, but yes, we analyze the patient accounts a little bit more than previously. So I guess you could say we're more analysts
Hmm.
than anything else.
Yeah, before you might be tracking, reporting, and now you're analyzing to make decisions on whatever. So maybe analyzing this in order to make suggestions or improvements or process changes. So
Okay.
before you're doing the things and now you're sort of improving the thing. That
Yes.
makes sense?
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. And look forward to seeing your resume, whatever it
You're
looks
gonna be
like.
like,
Right?
what in the world is this?
That's right. There's a lot of pieces here.
Yeah, you're
So,
gonna be like, there's so much, but
right. But that's all together. That's the thing that's fun to see all of your stories. Now, if some of you don't have as much experience as Laura, you might just have one section that's called experience or one section called relevant experience or healthcare. Some of you, like Sherry, I think it was that you were saying, like, I'm going to have my relevant and then I'm going to have supporting and it's my lab roles. So each one of you should look different because your backgrounds are different, the amount of experience and where you're coming from. Some of you might have experiences that weren't even related to this at all. You're like, I've worked at Starbucks for 7 years, but I still maybe want you to put that on there because it shows some of your skill sets in customer and management and critical thinking. So everyone will look a little different. Once you get into it and you're listing dates of things, one reminder, you don't need to put an exact date. You don't need to say May 13th, just May 2022 to present. So that helps simplify it. You don't need, sometimes people will put like the full address of where they worked or a zip code. You just need the city and state of the organization. Then I'm going to skip this because I want to get down to something else and then we'll come back here. I want you to think about these bulleted descriptions. Underneath, your goal is to move away from a task list that looks just like a position description and instead really focusing on the skill you used, what you accomplished, what you're proud of, what did you do well. So sometimes you might include numbers in there, the purpose of the analyzing of the records. So rather than just saying analyze records, promoted to position of analysis to make process improvements on efficiencies and whatever the reason was behind it. Or starting with, I think, Deidre, you asked this, you're starting with the skills. You're starting with, demonstrated ability to communicate with a broad range of individuals versus just what you did. So it's the level up, quantify, what did you do well? Think about where you've received really positive feedback from your supervisor, the things where people are like, you do this so well, or we want you to do more of this, or you're a leader in this. Those are the kind of things you'd want to showcase. Start with
Mary,
an
I'm sorry, Mary, would you put that underneath your relevant experience? Or would you put that under like the skills and knowledge?
I'd put
Like
it under your relevant experience.
relevant experience, okay.
Yeah, because you want it attached to the place where you gain that skill. So rather than having it sitting out there kind of by itself, saying I'm a strong communicator, you're attaching that to where you demonstrated that skill.
And then under the skills and knowledge would be where you would put more of the stuff that you possibly like gained during your courses.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
And some of it could be a list of technical skills or documentation systems that you've used in your jobs, but those other soft skills or accomplishments should be attached to the job itself or a bullet underneath the job itself. Mhm.
So would you add, like, if you have experience in, the EMR's the electronic record, like, we use Epic.
Mhm.
So that's a system that we use, and
Mhm.
like we have billing systems that we use, and like coding systems that we use to look up different codes. Are these things that need to be placed on the resume?
I would. I would either build it into like technical skills and then you're going to list those out just in kind of a laundry list, or it could be part of a bullet. So, utilized Epic for documentation system or whatever it might be. The reason why, two reasons. One is there's some larger hospital and insurance companies, larger organizations in general, that use some AI for the first screening of your resume, and they're looking for keywords. They're looking for Epic, and they're looking for that match, so you want that word on your resume. So that's one reason why. The other is just in general, the more systems you've had, they know you can learn new systems. Even if it's not the same one they use, the more you've had, the more you're able to adapt and learn new systems in the future. Would you say
Okay.
that's true, Katie? Is that how you would? Okay.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
always tell students to, especially if the job description is using those systems to, if they're saying they prefer Epic
Yeah.
experience and all those things, of course, include all of those applications that correlate to the job posting. So,
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
because Vitalware is like a system that we well, I don't use it in my current position much anymore, but in my previous one, I did, and that's how we looked up like certain codes for anesthesia codes. So they're more specific on the chart, but it allowed us to look up other policy and procedures per the Medicare guidelines for those. So we used it for other things too.
Mm-hmm.
So is that something that they would be looking for?
I would have it again sort of on that master document. I would include it. And if you're applying for something, it's like, this isn't, I don't think they're looking for this at all. You can always pull that back out again.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Deidre, were you going to ask something else? You're unmuted, but no, it was from before. Okay. Okay. Right. When you write these bulleted descriptions, again, you're skipping the like I was responsible for, my duties included, and you're jumping right into an action verb. In the resources I send you, there's a big list of action verbs because we tend to get stuck on like 3 or 4. I helped, I assisted, I guided. So we're giving you more ideas of what to use there. So you'll get that as a resource. The other thing, this last bullet in here, and this would be feedback I'd give to you if you submitted the resume. If you're using generic terms like a lot of, or many, or good, or love, I want you to think about more descriptive terms than that. So, I mean, this is super simplified, but if you said, looked at a lot of records every day, that doesn't really tell me much. Like, how many are for what purpose, or what were you analyzing for, what systems? I know that's none of you would do that. It's oversimplified, but that idea. Okay, a couple just to get you thinking about it. So this was someone at a call center. You can see if you add in some numbers or you added in the results or why you did it, how you did it, those adverbs and adjectives, it just progresses more and more. And not all of them have to be quite this long, but it gives you a sense of that development. The same here, this I think was someone in a social work field. I met with lots of different types of people. True, but tell me more. And they ended with built rapport and tailored approach to serve 50 clients from diverse backgrounds, ages, and educational levels. That means a lot more. Any bullet you put on, be ready for that to be turned into a question in an interview. So if someone had this, I might in an interview say, this is really interesting because this is important in our workplace as well. If I observed you building a rapport with a client, what would that look like? Or tell me about how you did tailor approaches and what that might have looked like in that workplace. So make sure you're putting things that you would have a story to go along with it. Okay, skills not tasks, try to show that, keep it concise. Once you have it, you feel like feeling pretty good, career services reviewed it, I turned it in for assignment, and now you have a very specific position in front of you. I would take that position description and take your resume and sort of cross-check them. So if it says looking for someone with experience in Epic and you didn't include that, but you've had that experience, make sure you're including it. So you have one that you're feeling pretty good about, and then you're tailoring. Tailoring doesn't mean like adding things you don't have skills in, but matching what they're looking for to make sure you're showcasing the right things in that application. So you actually are going to have like 3 versions of the resume. This big master one we talked about, the one you're like, this is what I think I'd use for my next job. And here's my tweak, my adjustment for the very specific thing I'm applying for right now. Okay. I always like this. Katie's had seen me share this before, but like a lot of us are like, yes, I'd love your feedback. And then people give you feedback. And you're like, shoot, I don't really want all your feedback. I was feeling pretty good about this in advance. And the other thing is you might get different sets of feedback from different people. So I might tell you one thing, your supervisor at work says something else. In the end, it's your document. I want you to feel really proud of whatever you put together. It does need to be honest and truthful and concise, but still telling about your skills and your background. So that stays consistent. But each of you, each of yours will and should be a little bit different from one another's. Okay. Before we do cover letters, which is much briefer, just so you know, other questions, think about your own content on resumes. Okay. Cover letters, like I said before, is really this narration. If you think and you really break it down, it's a 1-page document. It's usually about 3 to 4 paragraphs, about 10 to 12 sentences. People get overwhelmed and it's hard to start it. It's less than you think. You are sharing a little introduction of who you are, and then it's really why you and why them. Why are you interested in their position? Why are you interested in their organization? Why does their mission, their values align with what you're looking for in a position? Why you, just be careful not to reiterate everything they can read in their resume, but more of a summary of that. So it may, Laura, if we used, I haven't seen your resume yet, but the example yours might sound something like I'm proud of the experiences I've had in 8 different departments within the healthcare systems. When I look at the skills I've developed in each one of them, each one of these positions, it has prepared me for, to be an ideal candidate for your current position. And then you highlight some of the things. So it's not necessarily telling about each one of your positions, but how do they come together to be a good fit? A unique perspective, a philosophy, a background that you might have. When you write it, it's called fully blocked left style, which means you're not indenting like you would for a paper. Everything is all flush left, single space with double space between the paragraphs. If you really love whatever you came up with for your letterhead at the top of your resume, like your name and contact information, you can use that at the top of your cover letter as well. If you don't, you're just putting your address at the top, flush left. So there's a couple different examples of that in the resources I'll share with you. Some people find resumes more difficult because it's sort of time consuming. You're getting everything lined up. You're trying to get these great bullets, but it is more the facts about you. Some people find cover letters harder because it's you putting yourself out there, you really reflecting on why you are interested in this particular position or role. So it might depend on your personality type, which comes easy and which is more difficult. We actually in our office encourage students to consider using some AI to help you with these things. So not to write it completely for you, but if you have a paragraph and you're like, I think this describes it pretty well, you can run it through ChatGPT and see what kind of feedback you get. Or you might send your resume through ChatGPT or some other technology and say, what jobs would I qualify for given this resume? It's kind of amazing what it comes up with. It is also then public. If you share things out there, it's sort of in this big public. I don't even understand all the technology behind it. But I just had a student in and I was helping her with a bulleted description for something and we both got stuck. I put in something that was not written very well, and it was like, oh, yes, we're trying to write it. Let's flip your sentence around and start with this verb. It was beautiful. It still has to be your experience, but I'd rather have you get some assistance with that so you can focus on things like academics and the interview that's going to come up where you're telling these stories. So use it as a guide and an aid to support if needed. Okay. The greeting. This is the other thing I want to talk about. When you're submitting, if you know the hiring supervisor, I would address it to that person. So if you're emailing me or submitting an application to me for a position, you would put Dear Mary Anderson, or if I had a title, Dear Dr. Anderson, and then the information after that. Sometimes you can't find that, especially in bigger systems, and then you might use things like Dear Hiring Manager or Dear Human Resource Manager. So that would be the salutation or the greeting that you would use. This will be in the resources. This is sort of the basics. Why them? Why you? And then you end with something like, thank you for your time and consideration. I look forward to hearing from you, to set up a time to interview, to discuss my background in more detail. The other things that we hear from employers, I think that's all I have in here, about the cover letter is to be proud of what you've done, but not to overstate it either. Like, I am confident I will be your very number one candidate. Maybe, but it's like almost too much. But also to not be like, while I don't have a lot of direct experience in this field, I think I could be a good candidate. That's too soft. You want to land somewhere in between those two things. So focus on what you can bring in a realistic way. Sometimes people also put too much emphasis on why the position would be good for you. Like, this would be a great stepping stone for me as I begin my career. People don't really want to hire you and to have you as a stepping stone. They want to train you and have you excited about the place and the position. So those would be the other things I'd watch tone for as you write that cover letter. I don't think you're not requiring a cover letter, Katie, just the resume. Yeah. So focus on the resume first. Once that's submitted, you're working on, then start thinking about getting a draft of a cover letter. The beauty of having a draft is that when it comes time to actually apply, you're not staring at a blank sheet of paper, trying or a blank screen to write that letter. So even if you had a skeleton of it written out, it helps you to get going on the writing process. And then you definitely have to tweak it for each and every position because you're talking about why you're interested in them. And make sure you remember to change that. We just hear all these nightmare stories from HR folks like, they said, I can't wait to work at Ascension. They've just applied at Mayo Clinic, right? So remember to change. Maybe some of you have been on hiring committees too, and you've seen some of these errors, which helps you to become better in your own applications. Have you been on the other side of the table? Okay. We're at an hour. I'm going to pause. Other questions you have? Okay. Katie and I were saying an hour is about as much as, we can take in a setting. You may have tons more questions once you start working on it. That's fine. You just email me directly and say, I thought of something else after we got off, or when I started working on it, here's my next question. And if I don't know, Katie and I often go back and forth, like, what do you think about this? So we'll together give you answers the best we can. Okay. Anything
Right.
else for you, Katie?
I don't think
No.
so.
Okay.
Yeah, so feel free to apply what you learned tonight and submit to the resumes at css.edu website or email address, sorry. And they'll get back to you. And then Mary and I likely maybe tomorrow, I'll get the recording posted and I'll share the documents and this PowerPoint presentation with all of you as well through the announcements. So
That's great.
thank you all for
Awesome.
making the time to be here tonight. And thank you so much, Mary.
Yeah, thanks for your engagement. It's so much more interesting when you're asking great questions. It's
Yes,
great.
thank you all.
Thank you,
Great.
guys.
Thank you
Thanks.
so
Good
much.
night.
Bye.
Bye.